Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning Sewing with Shalancia. Today we are on lesson 5 of our Kitchen Connection series, and we are going to be making these really cute half aprons with pockets. If you are a member of our Creativity Shell crew, this pattern is available online for a free download. And if you signed up for this Kitchen Connection series, you should also have access to download this pattern. What you will need once your patterns are cut are two contrasting fabrics, and we'll cut those into the shape of your half apron. And you also need a longer strip of fabric, which you're going to be sewing together bright sides to use as the straps for your half apron like this. You can also put some buttons on here if you want to accessorize it. It's not 100% needed. It's really there for more of a decoration, but it is super cute. This little apron is a really fun project. It's really easy to sew. And once you get the hang of it, you can make plenty of these for gifts, presents for your friends, grandchildren, families, for just about everyone. So once you have all your materials and supplies and you guys are ready to go, let's start sewing. Let's begin by putting our apron pieces aside and let's start sewing our band. It is definitely a good idea to iron this band in half before you start pinning it, and you want to iron it together, right sides to bright sides. You can still go ahead and put some pins along here if you feel that you need the extra security to hold it in place, but with the ironing of it, it kind of holds it together for you. And when you sew it, you're going to sew it with a good half-inch seam allowance along the open edge side, not the folded edge side, so that you can close it up and turn it over to the bright side when you're finished. And as you're ready to sew, again, a good half-inch seam allowance is usually the width of this foot. You want to put your presser foot down, give this about a good 3-inch back stitch or 3-stitch back stitch, my apologies. And you are just going to straight stitch all the way down. You can see as you get closer to your pins, you can take them out as you're going along. And we are just going to sew the strap together. And once you are finished it, you will use a pin or a turning tool to turn it over to the bright side. And then you'll cut it in half so that this one strap becomes two. You get to the end. You do not necessarily need to backstitch this, but I do anyways, just as a habit, where when you're sewing things, if you just don't forget to backstitch, then you won't forget it. And again, if you have a turning tool, it does make this task just a little bit easier to do. But if you don't, you can always use a safety pin, and it also works as well. What you do is you pin it into one edge of it, you dive it into your fabric, and you basically push the pin and hold the fabric. I love teaching this skill to our younger students, especially when they're about 4, 5 years old. It is a really good trick that helps to really build up your fine motor skills. And if you ever lose a drawstring in like a hoodie or a pair of sweatpants, sometimes with turning tools, they work really well when you have a nice straight edge. They do have some now that do work with curved materials, but if you don't have one handy, most of the times you can always find a safety pin somewhere in your home. And it's a really, really good skill to teach this at such an early age, because once you do it once, you never forget it. And you basically just pull everything all the way through. Once you're finished this, you want to remove the pin, and then you want to just get this back under the iron so that it is nice and crisp. Once ironed, you can fold this in half, and then at this halfway marker, you cut in half to make the 2 straps for your apron. Or you can use the pink side like this. Once your pattern is cut, it should look like a nice trapezoid. And then we are going to leave about 3 inches across the top, which is going to be your band. And then we'll sew a pocket down the middle to separate this part into 2 different compartments. So what we're going to do is we are going to say this here is going to be the top of your pocket, and this is going to be the top of your apron, okay? So we're going to fold this fabric, just to unfold it, I'm sorry. And we are going to place our pieces back together, right sides to right sides. Remember, this edge is the top of your apron, and this edge is the top of your pocket. What we are going to do is we are going to sew around the 3 corners, sewing across the top of the edge of the fabric and along the side, and we are going to leave the top of your apron unsewn. Before doing so, however, we are going to sandwich our straps into this. We're going to put it about an inch down from the top. Let me get this so you can see it. About an inch from the top. And when I sandwich something, I'm just going to make it go into like a little L shape going downwards. That way it's not going to be too bulky when I start sewing. Okay? And then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm going to just place it about an inch down and just give it a gentle fold. And then we are going to cover this up. Going to also just put a straight pin to secure this strap, and another pin to secure that strap. And then I'm going to just put a few more pins in the interior. This is a lot of fabric. I'm just going to pin it together so that as I'm sewing, it's not all coming apart on me. Okay, so remember, we're going to start, maybe let's just say at the top right side. We're going to start at the top right side. We're going to go all the way down across the top of the pocket and then back up again so that we get both sides of this. So, and we're going to leave the top of this little apron open for now. We're going to get this under our machine. We're going to backstitch our 3 stitches. And then we are going to start our sewing using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which is also the width of the foot for this particular sewing machine. If your pins are in your way, you can also take them out as you are sewing. And you just want to make sure that you are capturing both of these fabrics in this stitch with your seam allowance all the way around. Once you get to this first corner, remember to pivot. And to pivot, you want to stop about a 1/2 to a 3/4 inch away from where your end point is of this fabric. You are going to lift your lever. You're going to turn your fabric 90 degrees counterclockwise, lower your presser foot again and start sewing. That pivot is one step that you use so much when sewing, and I find a lot of times people will take the threads out. You do not have to do that. Once you get to this point, you can see how my fabrics, I just didn't pin this corner. If you find that they start to separate, go ahead and just place them back together. These two fabric pieces should both be exactly the same, so they should be matching up. Again, you're at a corner. You're going to lift your lever, you're 90 degrees counterclockwise, lower the lever again, and start sewing. Now this is the third edge of my apron. I'm going to again line my pieces back up, and once you stretch them out, you see that they both do fit. And this is the third side of my apron. So this is also going to be the last piece that I am sewing for now. So we're going to go all the way to the end. Make sure you have that strap in there, and you are going to stitch. You get close to the end, you back stitch 3 times, and then this part of sewing is complete. Once you are finished sewing, if you have not removed these pins as of yet, please go ahead and do so before turning this apron back over to the bright side. And this opening that you have, before doing so also, if you have any excess fabric or some of these corners, go ahead and just do a nice diagonal cut on these corners. It helps to get away or to take away some of that bulk that will come into the corner pieces. And we're going to turn this over to the bright side. I know right now it looks more like a giant sack than it does an apron, but we are almost there. Just a little bit of patience and we will be finished, and it will look more like an apron soon. If you have a poking tool, go ahead and just poke out these edges. Check your stitching, check for any areas where that you may have missed anything, and then we are going to just put this entire piece and iron it out so we can make it nice and flat and smooth before we fold it into our apron shape. I think we're going to, I'm so torn. I'm like, do I use the yellow or do I use the pink side? I think I'm still going to stick with my pinks. I really, I like the contrast, but honestly, it could go either way. So once you're finished that, you also want to iron the top of your apron down by another ½ inch. Iron it together because we're going to stitch across here to close it up. You want to, unlike our other seam allowances, when we have been using our ½ inch seam allowance, this one we're going to use more like an edge stitch to get it sewn. What we want to do is just make sure that we don't leave too much of an opening, or if your fabric has any selvage showing, unless you want it to show, we just want to make sure that it's encased into all of this. Now remember, you want to back stitch about three stitches, and then we are going to just gently edge stitch this all the way across to close its opening. My seam allowance, if I had to measure it, it's probably about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, but we just do not want to use that same ½ inch seam allowance that we have been using all the way around. And like I said, if your machine has a decorative stitch, this is definitely a great place that you can use it because it just looks really pretty. It makes it kind of whimsical, and sometimes it's hard to know when to use those decorative stitches. This is definitely a really good time. And when you finish, you want to just back stitch your 3 stitches, and then you can remove from your machine. Choices. I love both of these fabrics so much. And I'm just kind of toying back and forth. Do I go with one side or the other. I'm still thinking that I'm going to go with the pink side as my outer edge, and it will look more like this. So what we're going to do is, since I'm using the pink side, I'm going to fold these two edges together. I'm going to give myself about an inch of space here before I begin, because when I finish, I want to put two buttons along the side, really for decorations. So I'm going to start about an inch down on both sides and just stitch the sides of this apron together. About an inch down. Oops. I'm going to lower my presser foot, my 3-stitch back stitch, and then I want to sew side 1. For seam allowance, I am using kind of in between a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you want to go back to your 1/2 inch seam allowance, that's perfectly fine. This is just really to secure it. And once you're finished, just do not forget to backstitch. And now I am going to sew the other side. You'll notice when I'm sewing that I always try to keep the bulk of my fabric to the left of my machine as opposed to doing it on the inside. So when you're sewing this end, as opposed to the previous one, you're starting from the bottom of your apron as opposed to the top. Just remember to stop sewing about an inch from the top as you did on the previous side. And you can see what's kind of happening here. I'm sewing like on a bit of an edge and my machine is just kind of holding it together. I'm going to use my left hand a little bit to see if I can just help the machine's feeder dogs, get that fabric out of there and get it sewing. If you find that it's too thick and your machine is stuck sewing in the same place, you definitely want to remove it and start trying it over again. So I'm going to finish about an inch away from the top, backstitch, and it will be complete. Almost there. Okay, my next step is to put a pocket in the middle. So to achieve that, I'm going to fold this pocket in half and I'm going to iron it, which will give me a really nice crease. And that will give me a stitching line to separate these two pockets. If you're ever trying to create a guideline and you don't want a mark on your fabric, ironing it is your best friend. So I will get it under my machine. I will lower my presser foot and backstitch my about 3 stitches until I get to the top of the pocket. And then I'm just going to straight stitch all the way through, right on top of that ironing line. And this is where I will get to my end. I will backstitch it. And I am almost finished this apron. Oops. And here you go. These aprons are super cute. You can make them in so many different variations. You can add your embroidery stitches to them. Like I said before, these corners are really great for adding decorative stitches if your machine has the capability to do so. You can switch up the bands. And one thing I did not show in my previous video was with these ends. You can just either hand stitch them or machine stitch them to close them up. And here you have your cute little half aprons. Thank you guys so much for sewing with me today. For more patterns, sewing tips, and tutorials, please visit our website at www.creativityshell.org and have so much fun sewing these half aprons. Thank you.